Welcome back to another episode of the Adventures in Advising podcast. And I can't think of a better person to have on right now than Dr. Melinda Anderson. Melinda, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. It's so good to be here as always. So good to see your face and feel your energy even through the screen. So good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. And I think the first question we have to throw out there is there was an email that was sent out in December. We're recording this in December. And it said, it was an email that you had sent out saying that you were taking a leave from NACADA. What?
Yeah. You know, um, Matt, I'm glad that, you've asked me this. I know a lot of people were probably surprised to receive that communication from me. But for those who have known me, have heard me speak, I'm always encouraging people to take care of themselves. We've spoken on that a lot, in a couple of podcasts about how important it is to take time to take care of yourself, especially if you're caring for family and then how do you pour from an empty cup, right?
Yeah.
And so I had somebody very wise say to me that sometimes it's important for us to take our own advice. And so, although it was a very difficult decision to make, it was one of those that I just felt very led to make that decision right now to take some time to be able to support my family, to be able to take some time um, to support um, everything that's happening with us. My Thanksgiving message kind of spoke to how critical time was and how important time is. Um, because time is the one thing you can't buy and it's the one thing that you can't get back. And so when I think about how much I do love my work, um, I do recognize that sometimes we need to show up for our family in different ways. So taking some time to be able to devote and pay attention to that was important. But I also feel it's important to be transparent and to communicate with those who may be depending on you or looking to you for support. So just wanting to make sure that everybody was aware. And, Wendy Troxel is the acting director. And so, I have no, full support for her. I have no, concerns about what's going to happen, because I'm not in the office right now. And that's what great teams do. They come together in times. I often tell people that, yes, I'm the executive director, but I don't do this work by myself, right? The executive office staff is amazing. They come together, they work hard. You saw that with the most recent annual conference experience we had. We all just come together and we do what we can to support each other. And so I'm just grateful for that team that's rallying around me right now. Um, and that's the work that we do, right? When we see that people need support and they need time to be able to kind of manage affairs differently, we all just kind of step up and we take turns. So this is my time.
Yeah, and just like you're saying with time, like we don't get that back. And how many times throughout the day do we lie to ourselves and like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow, or I'll take care
Right.
of this. And once this project's done, it'll free up so much more time, and I'll be able to work on myself and take that vacation. You know,
Matt, you're absolutely right. And if anything that we've learned, coming out of the pandemic and then moving into, just these precarious times in society, right before Thanksgiving. So I'm home in Chesapeake, Virginia right now, and right before Thanksgiving, there was a shooting at Walmart that took 6 lives. And you just have to keep thinking to yourself, I know that I don't always understand people's pain or why they show up the way that they do, these, violent acts that are sometimes, on the headlines, just as a headline. But then you think about the lives that have been impacted through the devastation, right? And here in Chesapeake, the community came around, supported those families. We've asked, not we, but my church leadership has asked Walmart, to pay out the salaries of those whose lives we've lost, because you recognize that there's the residual, the impact, right? That happens after you experience those things. So for us, it's a headline. We read it on the news and we move forward. But those families of the lives that have been impacted. they'll never forget that day, right? Their lives have been changed forever. And so then it's one of those moments where when you come into a holiday season and you think about all the joy and happiness some people may be feeling, but then also the sad and sorrow that a lot of people are feeling when they think about having the holidays without their loved ones. And so I think it is, you're right. It is important to be honest with yourself about how are you utilizing your time, what matters to you, what's important to you, what fills you up, right? And then trying to, manage and cut down on the things that don't bring you all the joy. Now, I tell my daughter all the time, look, sometimes you got to do the things that you don't want to do, right? So I'm not saying I don't want anybody to conflate that message like, you know what, you're right, Melinda, I'm out of here. Like, no, no, I'm not saying that. Um, whether it's work or relationship, right? Melinda's not giving that advice today. But what I'm saying is that it is important for us to be thinking through and measuring our time in different ways. Absolutely. Um, and just embrace the moment, staying present. I think that's a lot of what I was coming to realize. Like, how are you able to stay present in these moments? Because once they're gone, they're gone. So,
Oh, yeah. No, we'll just take the little snippet and then throw it out of context and be like, this is what Melinda's really saying. Just quit your job and just enjoy life.
let's all go to another country, right? And we live off the land, right? Now my sister and I joke about that all the time, like where would we move and become expats, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah, the holiday season, as we approach it and as we go into the new year, right? It's just this idea of renewal, this idea of, well, do you have New Year's resolutions? Do you do that? Do you participate in that madness of
Yeah. So
this is what I'm gonna do?
I remember us talking about this last year, and it was one of those where I try not to say I have the New Year's resolutions. I just try to say I have goals, but I try to start them before the new year so I can try to build that into a habit.
Right, right. Like everybody's like, I'm gonna go to the gym and lose 20 pounds,
Mhm.
right? And then like January 1st, the gym is slammed, and then like January 18th, the gym is back to
Yep.
normal kind of thing. Yeah, I'm like you. I used to participate in the madness of like, this is my New Year's resolution. And then
Mhm.
probably like maybe 5 years ago, I just said, this is how I want to change my life. This is how I want to move forward. These are the goals that I'm setting. And I do think of it differently and trying to make them more sustainable, right? And
Yeah.
you're right. I do try to start before January hits, right? So then I can feel like I've got some ownership, right? Because
Yep.
I've already kind of started the behaviors. So yeah, but for all those who still have, New Year's resolutions, congratulations. I hope that you're holding on to those as you move forward. But it is important to think about how you want to live and experience life differently. And sometimes,
Yeah.
if only in the New Year's spirit, to do reflect on that and think through that and come up with different directions for yourself, I still applaud that
Oh,
because
yeah.
sometimes that might be what you need in order to kind of kickstart it.
Oh, yeah. And I'm just trying to, I'm just thinking about what you've just said since we started recording. And, for me, it's, we're talking about sometimes you do need to put in that that work. And it's not always going to be, sunshine and rainbows every day. And we're not trying to say that's what life is going to be. But it
Right.
reminds me of Stephen Gaffney, who said, like, you sometimes in life you have to do things you don't like to do, but
Mm,
you should love why you're doing it. And sometimes that
right.
can help you get through in the short run so you can eventually address those things in the long run.
Oh, I agree. When I was younger, my mom would say, you've got to do your work before you play. So you come home, you do your homework, and then you can take the time to do the things that you enjoy, right? And as I've gotten older, you're right. If you always think about it as, oh, I don't want to, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But then you remember, like, this is either building strength or building
Yeah.
energy or building, like, that's what's keeping me working out every morning. I do
Mhm.
2 miles every morning and I walk. And when it got really cold outside, it was cool to do it in August and September,
Yeah.
right? And then it got to be, now we're in December and I was just like, you're doing this because it's a way to meditate in the morning. It's a way to be one with nature. It's a way to spend some time alone and just reflect. And so those are the reasons why you do it, right? But it's still
Mhm.
cold. I have like
Sure.
two hats on, I have gloves, I have two pairs of pants, right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I'm like gearing up, you know what I mean, just to go walking outside. But you're right, it's the reason why you are doing that work or pushing through, right? It's getting
Yeah.
sometimes, getting to the other side. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a mentality that you have to, like, work on each day, because I could imagine that as it gets colder where you're at, you can easily tell yourself, "You know what? I could do this later in the morning when it gets, like, 2 degrees warmer,"
Right.
or if I'm putting on these 2 pairs of sweatpants and jackets, "Oh, this is too much work. I'll just do it later," or,
Right.
"Let me just go buy a treadmill instead and do it in the house."
In the house, I know. That's the one thing my sister gets on me. She's like, "Why? I mean, just join a gym." And I'm like, "Oh, but to be one with nature." No, and like I said, it was cool when it was like August, September, and October, when it turns fall, and fall is my favorite season. And so, but here's where the work comes in, right? Like, how do you keep consistency in spirit and in energy? And for me, in truth, right? In terms of how I want to show up in the world when it is 23 or 24 degrees outside. And in Virginia it doesn't really snow until January or February, but in Kansas it has already um snowed once. So it was one of those moments where I was just like, what is happening, right? But just remembering the Midwest, that Midwest weather, is a little different, shows up differently. So
That's why I
you
like
know
Southern California, so you should come back and visit sometime.
I knew you were gonna throw that in there. I wasn't gonna put that out there for you, Matt, but I'm sure that you walking at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 in the morning is when I go, is probably not a problem. It might be a little snippy in the air, right? A
Yeah,
little.
well, we'll still wake up in California and be like, "It's freezing," and it's like, 65 degrees.
But when I was there for Region 9, it was simply gorgeous, simply gorgeous. And I often, still joke with my sister about us buying a house and then, renting it out one week, you know what I'm saying, so we can all afford to live there. But it was so gorgeous, and we had a great time. Region 9.
Yes. And that was earlier in 2022 with the region conferences. And I guess speaking of 2022 and looking back on it, reflecting back on 2022, how do you feel that year went for NACADA?
I think, Matt, when I think about from the beginning of the year, and not necessarily just around events, right? But like the fact that we were in a brand new year, what does this look like? We had amazing region conference events. And I was just really lucky and blessed to be able to participate in 9 of the 10. And the winter institutes and the summer institutes that we've had, just being able to talk to membership, to talk to advising administrators, professional advisors, faculty advisors, all throughout the year, thinking about the work that they're doing on their campuses, how they're showing up, how they're supporting their students, how our community is coming together to support each other. Um, for me, when I think about all the work that we've done in the association, all the support from the members, um, it's 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 humbling. It's humbling to think that you belong in a space that is moving right through such a paradigm shift in the way that we think about higher education, how students are experiencing their education in institutions, the conversations that are now happening at executive levels that weren't happening 5 years ago. Like I always tell people, like paradigm shifts, when you are going through a paradigm shift, it does not feel that way, right? You're just kind of like, okay, we used to do it like this, but now we do it like that. And we're thinking like this, and you know what I mean? And then you reflect on it like, oh, wow, that was amazing. Look at the paradigm shift that we experienced, right? No, but when you're going through that shift, that's not what it feels like. You know what I mean? There's all these unanswered questions, and how do we move forward? And what does the research show? And how do we solidify these promising practices? We don't say best practices anymore. You know what I mean? Like all those things. And so when I reflect on the year, it's number one, I always think how humbling it is to be in a space hearing all the work that's happening and how dedicated and supported our members, our conference participants are in terms of doing this work. It's amazing, right? Um, the other thing that I think about is the work that we're doing to build the foundation in order for NACADA to move in the next direction. When you think about how we're talking differently in our presentations, we're asking different questions when it comes to research and scholarship. Um, when we're thinking different, how our NACADA leaders are thinking differently and wanting to move in different spaces. We have the consulting work that's happening right now, evaluating our organization, because it's been 20 years since we've had a structural change. And our membership went from a little around 10 to like now we're over 13. I think it was 1325 is what it was last week, right? And so
Yeah.
you think about how we're going to continue to grow and how we're going to continue to transform. And for me, I feel like that's exciting. I know some people, when they're on a roller coaster and it's like going down the hill, they're like, "Ooh," and some people are like, yeah, I love this. And some people are like, oh my God, I think I'm gonna die. You know what I mean? But for me, it's that part of like, this is so exciting, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes in order to create something that's new, you have to stop doing the things that you were doing in order to do the things that are new, right? It's kind of the stop, start, and continue conversations that I've had a lot with the executive office. And the idea that as NACADA continues to grow and we solidify our footprint in the marketplace, when we're having these conversations around academic advising, we're having leading voices come out. We had the report in the Chronicle that comes out that said the future of academic advising, and they spoke to myself and Wendy Troxel about what is the research showing, what are promising practices, how do people need to be thinking about this work on their campuses. That's amazing, Matt, right? To find yourself in different platforms and having these conversations. I think about your podcast and how people tune in to kind of hear what's going on, and a lot of it around community is huge. When you think about how we come together, how we're sharing and giving of ideas. I've always been very touched by how giving our community is. Matt, I could call you or email you and say, hey, we're thinking about building this career ladder, and what does it look like, and what is going on your campus, or we're getting ready to create a new pre-professional advising center. You know what I mean? Like, what are some thoughts? Do you have some people that I can reach out and talk to? And we're always so generous, so generous. um, and when I think about how we've ended the year with the annual conference experience, and Matt, you were amazing, you and Leah leading that group, just really bringing us back, right? Cincinnati was amazing, but we knew that we were coming off of, the pandemic experience. And so coming into this annual conference experience, having over 3,000 people join us in person, having over 650 joining us virtually, so when we think about virtual programming in relationship to our in-person, I mean, all those things are being defined. And so again, I just want to thank you and all your hard work and leading that effort, and with your co-chair, Leah, and that committee. They were so amazing, just walking around the convention center. And I had never been to Portland before, so all of it was brand new and exciting. And then seeing so many people wanting to come and connect and share, it was just very powerful moment for
Oh
the
yeah.
association, the way that we showed up and showed out. So
Yeah. I mean, because it really did feel like NACADA's back, because when we're talking about, Cincinnati, yeah, so much was unknown in 2021. And then when the decision was made, okay, we're going to have this conference in Cincinnati, then you probably got a lot of questions like, are you sure you want to do that? Can it be safe? And it was proven that you could make it safe. But there were still so many questions that then rolled into 2022. And it's like, should we have region conferences? Will people, show up to it? Which they did. But then you still had, a lot of institutions that had budgetary issues. And then,
yeah,
is it still safe to send people to conferences? And I think as we got into summer, then we started seeing the uptick in the number of participants that were registered for Portland. And then it was like, okay, this actually seems like this is coming back to like pre-pandemic levels. And then
exactly.
you saw so many people that showed up virtually, in person. And yeah, it was definitely like just being able to, you never know who's going to be there. And then just to
Right.
stand there, look around and be like, wow, okay, we actually are putting on this conference. This is pretty amazing.
Right. And there were so many people that, I would hear conversations in the hallway of people saying, I have not seen you in over 3 years, or I haven't seen you in 4 years. You know what I mean? Because you're right. You don't know who's coming. You don't know who showed up. And not everybody can make it to Cincinnati. You're absolutely right about institutional impacts around budget. Not that people still didn't want to participate in professional development, but the is it safe? Do we have the funding to go? Our enrollments are dropping. What does that look like in order for us to be supported? But whoa, Matt, you were right. They showed up in Portland, and I, know that good energy is going to continue as we go into the region conference experiences, right? And and I love the fact that 3 regions are coming together, right?
Oh,
to
yeah.
do the one in Vegas. And so when I think about, just like I said, collaboration, coming together, creating experiences, um, we're also shifting into like different, markets. Region one's going to be in Boston.
Mhm.
Right. And so I know normally people, when they think about region experiences, like what city is it going to be located and everything like that. Right. But what I love about the region conference experience is that it still draws people regardless of where the location is going to be. But I
Right.
love seeing the innovation and new ideas, right? If we're in a larger market, do we draw people who maybe are not members yet, but then it's accessible so they can get there, right? When I think about three regions coming together and then pooling their resources and then pulling folks from all across those regions, you know what I mean? Just kind of thinking about, talking to somebody from a school that you might not have normally seen, right? Only at an annual conference, but then you go to a region conference and you're still getting that same level of experience and diversity of thought and everything. And so I'm just excited, for the Winter Institutes, Administrative Institute, the Assessment Institute, and then we have the Summer Institute that's going to be happening in June. And then we'll be in Orlando, Florida for the annual conference, right? I'm telling you, Matt, it's like I told my daughter when she first went to school, I was like, you're going to blink and your semester is going to feel like this, right? You're going to wake up, you're going to be a sophomore. You're going to close your eyes, you're going to wake up, you're going to be a junior. And she did not believe me, right? So then she calls me and she's like, Mom, you're right. Right after Thanksgiving, it's like 1 week of classes and you're straight into exams. But that's what it feels like sometimes with our NACADA events. We celebrate those moments, we celebrate the energy that went into the effort, and then people are excited about the next event, right? And that's what I do
Mhm.
love about our membership, and those who are wanting to come and participate in our experiences. Like if I can't get to one, then I have the opportunity to go to another. And
Right.
we've done that intentionally, right? Because these conversations need to keep going, this energy building community, and all needs to keep moving forward. And so just very excited about what 2023 is going to bring for us.
Well, it's perfect timing that you mentioned Orlando. So the October 2023 annual conference. So we're recording this on December 13th. And just a couple minutes ago, there was an email that got sent out from NACADA talking about the annual conference proposals are open. So uh, if you're listening to this in January, let's say, you have until February 23rd. That's the deadline to submit proposals for the Orlando conference for
Conference.
NACADA.
Yes. So please submit, connect with your colleagues, think about sessions that you could do together, definitely, I want to start talking to, our senior level administrators out there too, those key or new key positions that are going to be um, definitely, I think, are not going anywhere, right? When you think about how do we lead this work at senior level administrative positioning at your institutions. And so asking them to come in and submit presentations as well, right? So when we think about, how are leaders thinking about guiding and moving institutions together, but then also what is the promising practices and how we're connecting and supporting our students. And then I'm always encouraging people to think about writing for NACADA, what research, scholarship, but what are your thoughts, things that you are curious and interested in doing. There's a space for that here with us at NACADA. So just really encouraging people to think, what do you want to do professionally, in terms of building a new skill set or things that you want to share with others. Like I said, we are giving and receiving a community. And so, yes, we know that annual conferences are an opportunity to kind of gather with a lot of people. And so, really encouraging people to consider submitting a proposal for annual conference in Florida.
Yeah, and then kind of going back to Portland, you're mentioning some of the like conversations that you had, but any favorite memories or highlights from the Portland conference?
Oh, wow. Okay, so this question might get me in trouble, but I'm going to do my best. No,
I
because I
can always
think
edit
about
this later.
well, no, because I think about, we had a chance to celebrate Charlie, right? We had an opportunity because we didn't do it in Cincinnati because he was still, phasing out of, in retirement with NACADA. But then, he had fully retired. And so just an opportunity to celebrate him, and to acknowledge his work, his time, his dedication to the association, his energy. It just felt really good to be able to do that the way that we would have wanted to, right? Um, the keynote um, with It's Megan. I
Mhm.
just wanna make sure that okay, I'm not messing up her name. With
Yeah,
Megan.
Megan Redshirt
Oh
Shaw.
my
Yeah.
gosh, powerful, right? And I remember when I was reading her
Standing
bio.
ovation at the end.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Just reading her bio and thinking about the work that she's been doing with indigenous populations and oh my gosh, that was so good. So you kind of like go into the conference with like this good energy, but favorite memories, of course, are, the ones that you don't necessarily expect, right? Somebody that you haven't seen in a really long time. Um, I, Amy Strite is one of my, well, we worked together at William Mary. She was a GA and then she's like doing all these amazing things at James Madison, you know what I mean? So it was like, people that you didn't expect to see, people you were hoping to see. Um, so it was really good, just to connect with people I hadn't seen in a really long time. And um, you know, of course, being with the executive office staff, we work so hard, you know what I mean, to put on a good conference experience and stuff like that. And so just, seeing how we come together and we work hard together as a team and support each other. I always do like kind of those internal moments as well when I think about a conference experience. Celebrating, 15 years of ELP,
Yeah.
and so that's always wonderful, to just kind of recognize the work that people have done, the mentorship, the connections. I was in ELP and then as a mentee, as a mentee, and then as a mentor later. And so just those special moments, in terms of how you know how you've known somebody for a while, and then you're like, how did I how did I meet you? You know what I mean? Like, what was that? Like, did I just sit next to you in a session and we started talking?
Mhm.
Or, were we in ELP? You know what I mean? But we weren't necessarily paired up, but we were in the same class. Like, it was just amazing. Our award ceremony, just recognizing the great talent and that we have in the association. And so being at the awards program was just pretty special. And I do enjoy, connecting with the board and council. You know, um, they have great ideas. They are passionate about the association. They want to see it continue to grow and think differently about how we're showing up, right?
Right.
In terms of leading the conversation around academic advising. I know, right? I told you I was like, oh, I don't want to mess up, but now my mind is running with like all the things that I enjoyed, because I think about like the NACADA leaders. We had everybody come in and we did like a day when we were able to connect with everybody and talk a little bit about the state of the association, where's it going, um, some conversations in terms of what are their next steps in leading in the association. And so I always just love just seeing my friends, right? I wasn't always in this role as executive director. And so coming in from serving in a region to being a region two chair, right? And Matt, about that. Like when you are in a chair of a region, you're thinking about things differently, you're connecting people differently, and then moving to the council and then eventually the board. It was just kind of a nice way to think about my development, my leadership development, really, in NACADA. And so you're just seeing things differently, and certain things are touching your heart in certain ways where maybe in other positions I wouldn't have never seen the connections in that way. But then, and it's just sometimes just good to sit down and have a drink or have a meal, share a meal with your friends, right? And
Yeah.
that's one of the beautiful parts of when, the conferencing is kind of done, and then being able to kind of wind down into, happy hour and to dinner time. And so those moments were special. I sat with some friends from Region 2 um, that are near and dear to my heart. And it's one of those things where, you know, we're all NACADA members and we happen to belong to certain regions, right?
Yeah.
But I just remember when I first came into this association, those were some of the first friends and colleagues that were so supportive and helping me grow and think differently about my role as an advising administrator. So things like that, they're just priceless. They're irreplaceable too. And so it was just really good to have that level of experience. So those are some of my best memories. I know I've given you like 15 of them, but um, I was there for like almost a week, so it's a lot to kind of roll through. But I'm just really excited about what's next for us
Mhm.
because I have seen how amazing it can be, right? And so
Yeah.
that's the kind of energy that I want us to take into the next year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was there for a week as well, and I feel like it flew by. And but
It
it's
did.
just like you're talking about, like depending on what role you have, like you see things from these different perspectives. And
Mhm.
there are moments I literally was just either sitting or standing and would just like look and just
Yeah,
kind of take it in, and then seeing conversations over here, and then it's kind of looking like, oh yeah, do I need to take care of anything? Are there any fires that need to be put out? And then as long as no one knows about those fires, then that's what's most important. You hide them, you fix
exactly.
what you can. Um, but you're also talking about like the little things, like okay, you're having this conversation with this person, or you go to this session, or whatever it might be. But you're absolutely right. It is those little things that stand out. Getting to be a conference co-chair, and just getting to work with this planning committee that seriously just came together.
Yeah.
And you just see the magic, and you see kind of how their personalities all gel together, and everyone just worked as one unit. Wherever
Mhm.
someone needed to be, they took care of it. And they all had smiles on their faces, which,
Yes, they did.
yeah.
Let me tell you, every time I walked by the booth, it was like, "How
Yeah.
can I help? What can I
Yeah.
do? How can I support you?" And even though I know that you were probably running around with roller skates on just like I was, it was like ships passing in the night, like, "Oh my god, everything's good. Okay, great." Um, your energy, your passion, your commitment to NACADA, but then also that experience, right? Like sometimes things can be, oh my gosh, there's all the details, right? And dotting the I's and crossing the T's, or something doesn't go as well as we had planned, right? But
Right.
this is the beautiful part. Just like you said, I know what it was supposed to look like, but you
Mhm.
didn't know what it was supposed to look like, and you still loved it, right? And
Right.
so then it's about letting go of some of the things that we can't control.
Mhm.
So I just think that sometimes these are just great life lessons that we learn along the way too.
Oh, no, absolutely. I know for me, aside from like the planning committee, which definitely was a highlight for me, is just to just see them work. Also, working with Farah and Dana from the EO,
Oh
that
yeah.
and that's kind of how I gauged each morning, was how serious Farah was, or if she had a smile or a little smirk on her face, and I knew, okay, everything's going pretty well.
Right, right, right. No, you're absolutely right. Dana and Farah, they show up in tremendous ways when you think about all the nuances, right? The behind the scenes stuff that now that you've kind of walked that path with them. It's a lot, and I can never not say thank you enough to them, to other EO staff members that lead events, at that level, because there's just a lot going on. But I always just want to thank leadership, like you and Leah, your planning committee, that all do come together, because it is a team effort. You know what I mean? Not one person could do that work by themselves. And I think that Portland people were really excited. They were glad to be there. They're, um, um, just taking advantage of being in that space, and so leading that effort. I mean, over 3,000. That's a pretty, when you think about all the logistics that kind of come with that number. It was pretty big, but you guys did a tremendous job. So thank you again.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think my last highlight I would say is getting to meet Jenny Bloom in person.
Oh, yes.
like, like I talked about on the
Jenny
podcast
was
before, and
there.
it's something where like at Cincinnati, I was so looking forward to meeting her. I'm like, yeah, I'm friends with her on Facebook. We chatted through email before, and then now, and here it's like, okay, I get to go and see her in person. I saw her, but every time I would try to go up to her, she would either be in a conversation or someone would beat me to her and start having
Oh,
talking to her. And I'm like, okay, I guess next year. And then then Jenny's been a guest on the podcast, but been a guest host on the podcast. I'm like, I have to meet Jenny at some
you
point.
have to meet her.
And so
No,
I'm in
she's
the hotel lobby across from the convention center, and then I look outside, and there's someone that's running, jogging down the street. I'm like, I think that's Jenny Bloom. Okay, there's another missed opportunity. And then a couple hours later, I'm about to head over to go. It was like when registration opened up it was like on a Saturday. So I'm gonna head down to back down from the hotel, get to the lobby, start about to go across the street, and in the lobby, there's Jenny Bloom talking to someone.
Oh,
And I'm like, just my luck. So I said, you know what? I'm just gonna go interrupt this conversation. So
yeah.
I'm
Sometimes you
sorry for
just have to
interrupting the
do it, Matt.
conversation. Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, I have to say hi, give you a hug. And the one thing is I got to talk chat with her and her husband, and then I didn't even take a picture. So like there's no proof.
Oh my gosh, Matt. No, not you not taking a
Right.
picture. Oh, you've got to document that. But no, she's wonderful. She's so kind and so generous. Um, I'm glad that, at least you were just like, you know what? No, I'm tired of
Yeah.
just letting these things go because, like you said, it moves so quickly. You wake up, right? And you're just like, oh, this is day 3 of the conference. You know what I mean? If I don't do it now, it's a now or never kind of situation. And
Uh-huh.
so I'm glad that you were able to connect with her. Yeah.
And we talked about 2022, talked about your thoughts on how things went for NACADA, but like for you, in 2022 you were finishing up year 1, starting and going into year 2. So
Mhm.
I guess for you, how has that been in terms of you going finishing out your first year as executive director and then rolling into your second year?
Oh, sure. It was funny. That's the question I got asked a lot when I did happen to walk down the hallway and it looked like I wasn't roller skating. You know what I mean? Like if I was just kind of walking, not like walking, like
Right.
how you do the conference walk when you're like, I got to get to this room.
Oh yeah, it's like I'm on
Um,
I'm on a mission right now.
exactly. So for those who are not watching the video, I was moving my shoulders with a quick and urgent pace. So it was good, I think when I think about people asking me that question, just to kind of reflect in those moments, I've learned so much is kind of how I always would start, answering that question. I've learned a lot about association management. I've learned a lot about budget and finances. I've learned a lot about the politics and governance, leading it from a staff level, right? And not necessarily as being somebody who's served on the board or council. And so there's different things that you consider, different factors you think about. But the one thing I was pleasantly surprised to realize is that the heart of the work that we all do is still present. I think NACADA is unique in the work that we do with our volunteers and our leaders, that our hearts are full and they're present and people mean well. I remember when I first started in this association, and people would be like, "Oh, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. These people really aren't that nice. These people really aren't that." And I'm like, And then it's like year 5, year 6, because I have been in Nakata since 2009, and so then you start thinking to yourself like, no, no, this is it. If the shoe was going to drop, it would have always dropped. And so I think that learning from, you know, a, like a fiduciary perspective, you know what I mean? I think it's pretty big. I think a lot of us, when we work on campuses, this is what I always tell people, the provost gives you $5. You try to spend $5 because if you spend 4.30, they're going to ask for the 70 cents back, right? You know what I mean? Like when I think about how finances kind of operate on a campus, but when you think about, a nonprofit association, when you think about our status and everything like that, generating revenue, thinking about how we're managing expensive, like we were not different in terms of not having an impact from COVID, right? Like campuses were having an impact, other associations were having an impact, in terms of, just managing, through, whether it was losing members or whether it was, people weren't necessarily attending events and things of that nature. NACADA was no different, but I think learning what that means, how do we think about the work that we do, diversifying our programming and our services, offering more things online, how are we connecting or communicating or advertising, the opportunities. We've started, excellence in academic advising that, we've redesigned that program from 2 years to 1 year because a lot of schools are like, I still need to do this work, but I can't, I might not have 2 years to be able to do this work. Leadership is changing, so a provost could be here 1 year and be gone the next. When you think about support on your particular campus, I remember reading a report and they were saying that presidents, I think it's like around an average of 5 years time span, of them spending time on campus. So when you think about how effectively can we do work, right, and how do we do it efficiently, How do we work smarter, not harder? So our excellence in academic advising program redesign is a testament to that, right? People need to do this work. They don't have all the time in the world to be able to get this done anymore because they need decisions to be made sooner rather than later. We had our advising outcomes survey, launch. And so when we think about that in comparison to like NESI or SESI, being able to have this survey provide real information um, to you about how you're going to steer your advising program and services forward, that's huge for us, right? You know what I mean? In terms of the things that we're doing that speak to the field, but still also paying attention to our events and the community development and leadership development. When you think about some of the things that the membership and retention committee, when they start looking at, uniquely members' experiences in NACADA and creating modules online for leadership development and support within the association. So we've learned a lot about who we want to be. And I've learned a lot about what is required in order to make those things happen. So that's probably more of a detailed answer than I went into at the conference. It was like, I'm learning a lot. Things are great. You know what I mean? Like I'm busy, but it's good. But I think sometimes it's good to be in these spaces and to be reflective, Matt, and to be honest about like there's a lot of things that any professional still needs to learn in order to grow and move forward. And so I've just had the privilege, in the past year and a half to be able to be at the helm in such a way that, I'm being stretched and grown and wanting to do good work for our association to be here another 40, 50, 60 years, right? As we are coming up on, celebrating 45 on the road to 50, when you think about how old our association is. And so I just feel good about where we are and the transitions that we're making. Because, like I said, in that paradigm shift, you may not feel like this is going to be good, but I know that it is going to be good for us to be sustained onward in the future.
100%. And as we end this interview, any message that I'll leave this time for you, like we've done many times on this podcast, anything that you want to say, last messages to listeners?
Last messages. So, I do want to give a shout out to my mom.
All right.
We
Yes.
start thinking about like holiday traditions before we started recording. We talked a little bit about my little the Black Santa back here. My mom started collecting them when we were younger, and so my husband's continued that with giving me a Santa each year. So, just want to shout out to my mom
Yay.
because when I think about my final message to everybody, and Matt, I want to thank you for, just your generosity and providing this platform for others and asking me to be a part of this experience because I know a lot of people listen and they're inspired by the message that you're bringing them. So I just want to thank you. I'm just grateful to you for allowing me to have this space and time. When I think about how we move out of this year into the next year, I know that a lot of people might be, moving out of this year and coming into next year with either broken hearts, right? Or exhaustion, or, um, just, feeling a little bit lost as we're kind of winding down this year just because of everything that we've experienced. But my message of hope when we think about how we're coming into the next year is to remember that not everything is permanent in our minds, right? Like when you think about how you're wanting to grow and change and to move differently or to think differently, we have the ability to change a lot of the things that we think that we can't. And so I think it's about building community, it's about networking, it's about just remembering that you have the capacity to change and to operate differently in all of our spaces. And I'm not just talking about work, but about our lives. That's the message of hope that we bring to our students every day. I remember sitting there talking to my students like, you know what, you are not your grades. You are not, your indecision. You are not your background or your circumstances that have brought you to this point where you're seeking help and support and guidance, right? We do that work every day, Matt, but we don't give that to ourselves. We really don't. We don't give ourselves the grace that we give others. And so my encouragement would be for people to give that grace to themselves, We're not meant to be alone in this work in life, and so making those connections, holding on to our friends and our community, our families, however that shows up for you, just remembering that that's what's going to hold us together in those times and those spaces where we're fatigued. But the hope that I hope people I hope sorry the hope that I would want people to carry forward is the fact that we are supposed to continue to grow and evolve. We're supposed to be thinking differently. I always told myself, if I'm the same person that I was last year, then something went horribly wrong. So sometimes we're in those fires because they're forging us to be stronger. I remember reading something the other day, um, and it was talking about, diamonds are formed under pressure. And I think sometimes we don't want to realize that you need pressure to make diamonds, right? Sometimes we just want things to be well. But it's in those moments is when you're really forging your strength and your energy to be sustained as you move forward into the next directions. And so going into 2023, I am hopeful. I am excited. The future looks bright. And I hope to take this time that I mentioned earlier to renew my strength and energy, to show up differently, for my family and well, for myself, right? I'm working on that self care, showing up differently for myself and then for my family and then ultimately for my profession.
Uh, and I just want to say, like, I getting to know you over these last couple of years. I mean, I know, I think the first time we met was recording for the Emerging Leaders Program for a promotion for that. And I was just in awe of talking to you. And then, then we interviewed you for the podcast when you won the the election for becoming NACADA president, and then a couple weeks later, like, nope, we need to update this interview because now Melinda's the executive director of NACADA. So it's kind of like changes happen sometimes within a short period of time, and it's like how you roll with it. And then just having to have this opportunity of getting to chat with you, having multiple episodes of the podcast, talking about conferences, you being our keynote at the Region 9 CalCan conference back in spring, and just seeing how you kind of go in stride with everything. And yes, please, it's following your advice that you give to others, but just the work you've put in, and just again, me just observing over the last couple of years, it's been an honor getting to know you and working with you. And I hope I get to continue to work with you and bounce ideas, and see where life takes us and academic advising in the future.
Absolutely. And I share the same admiration for you, just meeting you and thinking about, wow, he's on to something about thinking differently about how we're sharing and communicating these messages and how narratives of stories, people's lives, right? And how they show up and teach us things. And so you've just done a brilliant job in curating that and those messages for us. And I know that the podcast is not going to be as frequently produced. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to say that it's stopping because I'm like, no, no, Matt, absolutely not. But when I think about that decision that you made, it's powerful, right? It's the same decision, or choices that, I've had to ask myself, And so I just know that this work will continue. It may show up differently, but right, that's the point of
Yeah.
evolution, right? That's why we continue to evolve and to grow. And so then again, just thanking you for your work and having giving me an opportunity to be here and to share this message with everybody. I think in one of my AAT articles, I talked about how hope springs eternal.
Mhm.
And that's exactly where, I have to lay my hat these days. So,
Yeah. And kind of listen to you since we started recording, like the one quote that keeps popping up in my head, and this is where I'm a nerd. I'm a Trekkie, Star Trek.
yes,
So,
me
so,
too.
so Captain Jean-Luc Picard said that time is a companion that goes with us on the journey and reminds us to cherish every moment because they may never come again. So what we leave behind is not as important as how we've lived.
Oh, I love that. That's a beautiful way to end this session. Yeah,
So,
I
as
agree.
always, Melinda, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
And thank you, Matt, for having me.